Hello, I'm June Scobee Rogers at the Medal of Honor Center in Chattanooga. And today we are honored to have a special guest. We have Mayor Weston Wamp. Now, I'm curious about what a mayor of a county is all about versus one of the city. And I know this man has 5 children. I'm wondering how he balances a family like that and an important government position. I'm asking, you're going to answer some of those questions, Mayor Wamp.
Well, I'll try my best. I'll tell you, I'm not totally comfortable with you describing me as the special guest. In the family I grew up in, you were maybe the most esteemed member of our community, and I'm honored to be here, and I'll do my best to answer your questions.
Thank you, Weston. Okay, tell us a little bit about growing up um, in Chattanooga, no less. Yes, what was it like with a family involved in so many things?
Well, I grew up in an interesting family in a wonderful town that you've played a great role in. Our family story in Chattanooga started with my grandfather moving here as a former Army pilot and Auburn educated architect, and he set up shop here. Both of my dad's parents were from Coleman, Alabama, but he'd gone to Auburn Architecture School and then flew planes in the Army. And when he was ready to start a career, there wasn't much of an architecture business to be had in rural Alabama, so he came to Chattanooga. And that's really how our family story began. That's how we got here. A lot of folks ended up knowing our last name because my dad served in Congress, and that was a very unusual way for my sister Cody and I to grow up, but a privileged way to grow up because my dad was a true commuter congressman, and you knew him through all those years. But really, from first grade for me through my time at the University of Tennessee, he served in the U.S. Congress, and so it's a wonderful privilege to grow up at the feet of a lot of our country's great leaders, to get to see government at the highest level in the greatest country ever, and it was very normal for Cody and I. I mean, I think that's the flip. So you only know, as a kid, you only know what you're around. And my dad to this day is a very decent, humble guy. And so he and my mom, who's also from here, Hickson High School graduate, they made our life, on the one hand, very normal. And then we had an opportunity to see things in our country from a vantage point that very few children get to. And it gave my sister and I think both an appreciation for our country and its origins and the importance of public service, and then it seeded in us an interest in pursuing public service ourselves.
Yeah. So the public service, it's in the whole family. Your sister is in public service?
My younger sister, is actually a much more impressive person than I am at this point. She's our district attorney here in Hamilton County, and increasingly a notorious district attorney in the state of Tennessee. And this week, she's actually been featured in headlines all across the country because she's trying the first criminal case in America that involves evidence from ChatGPT. And so she was on the NBC Nightly News a couple nights ago. So she's really the big star of the family. And I'm carrying out the people's work in county government, which is both rewarding and frustrating.
So with county government, you're responsible to the county's education system, our health, our welfare, our survival and upkeep and what have you. Tell us what those different jobs are and which one is the most challenging.
Well, I'll step back a little bit because I'm sure there's people who watch and listen to your show who aren't from Tennessee and therefore aren't familiar with our way of governance. In 1978, the Tennessee state legislature, in the spirit of counties being subdivisions of the state of Tennessee, reformatted county government to reflect more of a typical municipal government style where you have or the state government, you can look at it either way, with a legislative body and an executive branch. Some counties don't have both. In other words, in Georgia, you'll have commissioners who are both effectively the executive and the legislative, and then they'll hire a county manager. In Tennessee, all the counties hire, the voters of the counties hire a person who runs the day-to-day operations of the county. And I think the clearest way in Tennessee to think about the role of a county is as a subdivision of the state of Tennessee. Constitutional responsibilities, a jail, a public health system, a public school system, to your point. Ambulance service is another statutory responsibility of counties. And then, of course, cities can pop up and serve a variety of additional needs. But we're the backbone layer of local government. The most challenging, as you asked, the most challenging part of that is probably driving change in public education. County government is the funding body of public education. School boards don't have taxing authority in Tennessee, which is pretty unusual. So county governments fund school boards and school systems, and driving change in public education is, first of all, incredibly important. I don't think there's anything more important to the future of our country or to communities than that. And in a lot of respects, education has gone wayward. It's not as strong as it was when you were a kid at Palm Beach High School. Is that what you were saying? It's not. I mean, the American education system has weakened, and I think there's a little bit of a revival underway. We've contributed to that in some major investments in career and technical education, and really meeting young people where they are. A one-size-fits-all model is definitely not the solution, and so that's where we have focused a lot of our time and energy and resources is towards lifting up the giftedness of every child, and certainly not assuming that certain gifts are more valuable than other gifts, but that is difficult. The change in almost the structures of public education are designed to be resistant to change. It's rewarding, and we've made some progress, but that's probably the most difficult. The other one is just the executive legislative dynamic. That's why I grew up in a legislative family, and so understanding. In our case, we have a county commission of 11. They're all quite a bit older than I am. Some of them are twice as old as I am, and so getting 6 out of 11 of them to go along with any major agenda item has been difficult. But I've learned a lot about myself in the process.
Well, that is tremendous. And having been a teacher, former teacher myself, and college professor, I know that some students really need to move toward a career rather than of activity, and they need to be a good electrician, a good plumber. We need those people.
Right.
But not everyone is cut out for more books and college education. So I'm very impressed that you're working in that vein to help those youngsters have a place to learn.
Yeah, well, we think it's a big part of the future of the country, particularly as you see AI and other technologies and robotics change fundamentally the economy and the types of jobs that will be out in the future. What I want my children, so I'm able as a county mayor to think about public education for 45,000 students through the lens of my 5 children, 3 of whom are public school students, the other 2 will be soon enough. I want them to all be people who add value to the world. You have added tremendous value to the world. And if you think of your life that way, less about maybe a certain thing you can learn or a certain set of skills, but learning is a lifelong process. And one of the things that I think goes wrong, particularly from boys, I can speak from experience, is that learning it gains a negative connotation early in life or in your educational journey, and you never recover from it. Because what we really want in those formative years of life is we want kids to learn how they can love to learn, right? I mean, it's like this is a part of your life where you realize, I actually love to learn, but it looks different for everybody. Yeah. Honestly, I didn't really begin to love learning until I was a college graduate.
Oh.
I mean, that's where I learned a whole lot more probably in my 20s than I had at any point before that, because it's sort of, and some of this was probably a credit to my grandmother, who was a voracious reader. And I began to realize, I can learn about all sorts of different things, and nobody has to be my guide. I can work through books and different things, and now there's all sorts of tools out in the world and on the internet to help you learn. And so I think that's how we think, even on career and technical education. Part of the goal is just to pique the interest of students so that they realize they have that moment where they realize, learning can be a lot of fun. And then the whole game changes. And often when that happens, career and technical education leads to higher education. Because career and technical education, using your hands, thinking about things differently, applied learning opens a door to more learning opportunities.
That's what we are all about at the Challenger Center.
That's right.
Yes, and thank you so much, because the government, both the city and the county, helped to create that Challenger Center at the UTC campus. And you've also contributed county support for the Medal of Honor Center here
We have.
And thank you. Now you're supporting Coffee with June. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm honored to. And I was a student, by the way, who in the very early days of the Challenger Center, I would have been one of the first cohorts of students to come to the Challenger Center as a student at Big Ridge Elementary.
Well, speaking of children, tell me how you balance this life of 5 children and this prestigious, busy career.
Yeah, I have 5 children. I had 4 children when I came into office.
Wow.
I'll share with you because you know my father and my mother. After I got elected, my dad had this. He was best of intentions, but he had this very heartfelt conversation with me about how I was going to need to balance all the demands of public work with a family. And I said, Dad, I love you, and my dad and I have always been close, and my sister's always been close to my dad, but he was a congressman who was gone 4 or 5 days a week, right? Most of our life. And Congress used to work more than they work now. And my point there was just to remind him that this job, getting involved in local government, I don't travel, I don't do conferences. So I'm here almost and just an hour or 2 after we record this, I'll be throwing football in the yard. So it's a real privilege of local government that I'm home every night, but I'm usually home for dinner every night. And so part of the answer to your question, how do I maintain balance? I maintain sanity. Politics will drive you crazy. I maintain sanity because I go home and play with kids every night, so there's a grounding element. But part of the balance is just that I work very hard during the day, but usually, with few exceptions, I just don't do things after work hours. Now that's unconventional. A lot of politicians are moving around town doing evening receptions, and I'll make an exception every now and then, but that's kind of my rule, is I just leave work at the end of the day and go home, and I'm a dad, and it's that's how I get the balance. Is just some of the creating some firewalls, and then the other one is, and this was something my dad always practiced when I was growing up, is just Sundays are basically totally off limits. Other than maybe 1 or 2 events a year, I won't do anything related to my public work on Sundays.
You have a tremendous partner in life. Your wife, Shelby, is her name?
Mm-hmm.
She must be an angel with what she can manage to work with you and the children.
She is a very cool girl. She's very creative, and everybody who knows her knows that she's kind of the tastemaker. She's got great style. She puts on a great party. She is not political at all, which is really interesting. And that's another balancing element to my life is, however cool or terrible on any given day people think I am based on my job. Maybe I've done something great and people are, or I've done something controversial and people are mad at me. She normally just doesn't really know. And I would say in a way that mothers who are in the middle of it can relate to, she doesn't really care. It's, I have a job like other people have a job. Yeah. And it's been, I think, real helpful. A toxic dynamic, just having grown up in and around politics, is a spouse, whether you're a woman in office and your husband is, really too involved. The person who's in the public life needs a balance where their life is more normal and the conversation is not just about government things and political drama. And so that's part of what people around me love about Shelby, is that she is in a sense too cool for politics.
I love it. And she's very pretty. Yeah. How did you two meet?
That's an interesting story. Her mother was it still is a middle school office administrator at the middle school I went to. And when I was in high school, I would do you had kind of almost an internship program. I forget what they called it, but a high school student could go and work alongside a staff person at the school. And office aide. I was an office aide to her mom, and her mom and I became just best of friends over my sophomore and junior year of high school. And Shelby was her younger daughter, and very pretty girl. She's 5.5 years younger than me. And so when I came back to Chattanooga from college, she had gone to college, and I had stayed in touch with her mom. And once she became a college student, all my friends knew that I had my eye on her, and sure enough, we got introduced, and we were engaged a year later. That's right.
Well, she married a good volunteer.
That's right.
Went to Tennessee. UT volunteers. Good for you. Well, what does the future look like? Local? Would you go to state government or federal government? are you looking to do something else in the future?
I get asked this a lot. I don't know. I mean, when you have young children, for just about anybody, but I'd say especially in a large family, because there's just logistical challenges that come with that. Most of our thought about the future is connected to where they'll be in school, and our career can respond to that. Local government is incredibly rewarding because this is sort of self-evident when you say it, but if you've grown up around federal politics, it's not obvious. And that is that everything you do in local government affects your community. And everybody cares about their community. No, I don't care what anybody says. Everybody cares about their community more than some other community. And the thing about local government is every project that I worked on today benefits this county where I grew up and where my kids go to school and where I hope that some or all of them grow up. So I love local government. When I signed up for this job, I self-imposed term limits because I thought that would be an interesting forcing mechanism. It would create a sense of urgency. I think it has. I'm nearing the halfway mark of the 8 years that I committed to. And then I will say, you asked that question, I don't have any interest in going to Washington for a long time. I think Washington is somewhat sad right now. And I just say that like with reverence for our country and having grown up around it, having grown up around Congress, it just feels really sad. And that's not partisan commentary. The institution doesn't work like it used to. So I don't have much interest in doing that anytime soon. State government's very fascinating, particularly from a local government perspective. You realize that, we are still, I tell students this all the time, we are the United States of America. Because of Fox News and CNN, there's this tendency to orient ourselves and our political thoughts around Washington. But it's not the way the country was designed. We are United States. There's 50 states, living basically living laboratories of democracy, and they make most of the rules. Different than a lot of countries. It's interesting when I talk to friends from around the world, they don't realize how many of the laws that matter in this country, are written in our state capitals, not in our U.S. Capitol. So I would say, maybe not an elected office, but I'm certainly very interested in the future of Tennessee, because Tennessee, from the time I was growing up, I'd say is a good state. All of us, those of us who grew up here had pride in it. Volunteer state, volunteerism has run in our blood. But Tennessee today is at the forefront of almost everything. It is frankly a different state in terms of its profile, even than it was 10 years ago. So increasingly, any of us in government, I think, are realizing this moment that has been brewing over the last 10 or 20 years where, it emanates out of Nashville. Chattanooga is, even the state leaders will tell you, Chattanooga is really the other city with the most upside. But, last week, just normal week in Nashville, they announced that Starbucks is bringing their Southeast headquarters and a couple thousand jobs. And it just seems like an announcement like that comes this is a sort of announcement, 20 years ago that you might get once every decade. And now, every few months you got some big announcement about Tennessee being on the radar nationally and even internationally. So it's certainly a fun time to be in the public sector in this state.
You bet it is. And here at the National Medal of Honor, we are called national because the very first Medal of Honor was given here.
Right.
Yes. So we go back to a bit of history. How many different communities are there in Hamilton County, or subdivisions, or what would you call them, communities?
Yeah. So there are 10 municipalities, 10 cities and towns within the county. There's about 390,000 people who live in the county today. A little less than half of those people live in Chattanooga. And then the second largest group of people would be people who live in the unincorporated areas. That's about 120,000 people who live in the not in a town, somewhere in between. What used to be rural areas are increasingly, particularly out east, being built up. And then 9 other municipalities other than Chattanooga. If you enter from the south, from Georgia, you come into East Ridge. We're sort of notorious for our mountain communities, Lookout Mountain and Signal Mountain and Walden. Collegedale, I think really in a lot of ways the most underrated of the municipalities around here, certainly to raise a family, would be Soddy Daisy. Great schools, kindergarten through high school. That's a lot of what drove our decision to move to Signal Mountain, some of the best schools in the South. But that's the general landscape, and it's an interesting fabric of a community because you've got really urban core in Chattanooga that's got some challenges. You drive to the northeast part of the county, probably 55 minutes away from the other side in Birchwood, and it's impoverished in very different ways and challenged, but both sides of the county are beautiful, and it's always been, going back to the Native Americans, this has been a very interesting part of the country, right? It's where the Tennessee River, winds through the lower Appalachian Mountains, and I think those of us who grew up here, we take the landscape for granted, but it is still in a lot of ways our greatest selling point.
One of those municipalities is Ottawa, and here at the Medal of Honor Center, we have a gift store that has all kinds of little puppets for children. When I was a teacher, I used puppets to teach some of the lessons. So many people have compared your integrity to that of Desmond Doss from Ottawa. Desmond Doss didn't really want to carry a gun and be in the military. He wanted to rescue people. That's why it has that little rope here. He would climb up and down the hills to rescue people. And here at the Medal of Honor, and one of the display cases is an image of him climbing down this wall to rescue someone at the top with an individual. So lots of them. Every great politician, a woman and men, and leaders in government, and they've all received medals of honor of some kind. So it's fairly interesting.
That is cool. Well, I don't think I would only object to being mentioned in the same category as Desmond Doss, except that if you grew up in this community, you know of the legacy of Doss and Coolidge, and these are the sorts of extraordinary examples of public sector leadership that have built our country.
Yes.
And I think too often now in the public sector, you've got politicians who want to make a name for themselves and create the new thing, and they think about their legacy as opposed to their responsibility to a community, in this case, a community that I was raised in, not just one that I'm living in and raising my children in, but a responsibility to go and be a steward of the community that people like Desmond Doss built. And that's how I try to think about my work. And if along the way people are impressed by what I do, great. But it's really, I think that it's the spirit of Tennessee, but even of the country, right? It's one of stewardship and responsibility in the public sector. I think we've lost some of that, but it's what I've tried to be about.
Have you written your book yet?
No. I tried to write a book about 10 years ago, and I had an agent who shopped it, but
no, you've got
it wasn't a good enough book.
Your words today should be in a book. This is my book I'm presenting to you. It was written a few years ago. It includes my childhood, mostly growing up in Alabama, and the middle part of it is all about the Challenger crew and the Challenger space shuttle and how we lost them on that tragic day in 1986. And then the last part of it is about my life here in Chattanooga with General Rogers. So it was a work of joy to recreate it. And actually, it was Don Rogers who said, June, I noticed that every time someone interviews you, you won't talk about your childhood. And I said, well, that was pretty sad and embarrassing, and I don't know. I can't do that. And he said, write the book.
That's sweet.
And then you can refer the reporters to the book.
And you don't have to talk about it. Well, I look forward to reading.
So thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us.
I'm honored to. Thank you.
Anything else you would like to add?
No, other than thank you for your leadership. Like, you had forgotten that I was a wee little lad who came through the Challenger Center when you were earlier in that journey. And I just, again, I don't mean to be critical, but I think there are a lot of folks who feel like they contribute whatever they intended to contribute, and then they move on with their lives. And you've just been a very faithful giver, throughout my life as a kid into adulthood, and I'm grateful for your leadership.
Well, some people say persistence is a euphemism for stubborn.
Yeah,
it took it.
That's how you get stuff done.
Lots of perseverance, really. Thank you so much for being with us
ma'am.
today. Thank you.